For the third year in a row, Leinster fell at the final hurdle in Europe. This time it was Toulouse inflicting misery on Leo Cullen's men after a dramatic extra-time victory in Spurs Stadium on Saturday. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. Will Slattery here with you, and I'm delighted to be joined by Luke Fitzgerald and Cian Tracy to pick through all the talking points from the weekend and ask the question as to where Leinster go from here, not only this season but also going forward. And Cian, obviously losing in 2022 from a last second try was traumatic. Squandering a 17-point lead on home soil was probably even worse. But for me, from just a pure kind of rugby 80-minute perspective, I think this was the worst of the three final defeats for Leinster. The sheer amount of chances they created, while not even playing at their best by any means, but to the amount of knock-ons, the amount of kind of poor decision making. Obviously there was some great scramble defence and turnovers from Toulouse, but every 5 minutes it seemed like Leinster were missing another gilt-edged opportunity, and then to still have a drop goal to win the game kind of showed to me how they really should have had that game put away earlier. What's your perspective on it, and how do you kind of rank this and assess what happened?
I think they're different. They're all different, to be honest. Obviously in this one they hadn't built up a huge lead that they let slip, which happened in Marseille and Dublin last year, so definitely different in that sense. But I don't know, to me, the most jarring stat and aspect of the game was 19 turnovers. I mean, unheard of from a Leinster team, particularly a Leinster team stacked full of world-class players that they had. And watching it at the time live in the stadium on Saturday, you were sort of putting it down to a few nerves. Was it this? Was it that? Robbie Henshaw made an interesting point afterwards, said that they were struggling to hear each other on the pitch, that maybe that lack of communication was partly down to the amount of passes that went to ground, the amount of players that overran lines, throwing offloads that just didn't go to hand, and compounding errors that we've spoken about on this podcast from a Leinster point of view already this season, which in the past we just haven't been used to seeing it, and it's crept into their game where they make one mistake and follow it up with another mistake, and they paid the price for that, Will. We've spoken a lot about, the focus that they've put on their defence, and their defence for the most part was very good, but they got taken apart at the breakdown. I think part of that was down to Matthew Carley's interpretation of it. He laid down an early marker by penalising Jamie Osborne after, was it 4 minutes, which I thought was actually very harsh penalty, I have to say. Now, he did the same to Paul Cost as well, so the rules of engagement were set, but Leinster never seemed to fully adapt to what he was looking for. And once Toulouse stopped Leinster at source, I mean, it was quite jarring to see how slow some of their ruck ball was. We know that under 3 seconds is kind of the magic number, but they just didn't have that platform to play off. And their attack, which has been questioned all season when it needed it most, just did not fire at all. I was really disappointed that they didn't seem to have, set piece moves up their sleeve. I know they ran a couple of plays off lineouts and made a break, one particular one through Robbie Henshaw, but by and large the attack looked really blunt, worryingly so, I would say. A lot's been said about Jacques Nienaber coming in late, and I made this point in our podcast straight after the match that maybe the point that Andrew Goodman missed pre-season because he was at the World Cup hasn't been discussed a lot as well, because that was a crucial time to bed in your ideas with Stuart Lancaster gone, who was obviously a key part of that. So there was so much in it, Will, and even watching it back again today for the third time, I was still picking pieces out. The amount of chances and overlaps that the players just didn't see, whoever were carrying the ball. They seemed adamant to try and take Toulouse on up the guts, where there was at least 4 if not 5 pictures that I picked out in the game where you can see the outside backs have their hands up in the air and they're screaming for the ball because Toulouse are caught short on the outside, but Leinster don't get their head up and do it. A lack of scanning, and then you look at Antoine Dupont and the way he can scan the picture. So it was really disappointing from a Leinster point of view, but I do think we should give credit to Toulouse. I thought they were seriously impressive, and how they got the second wind in extra time was excellent, and I thought on the day they were deserving winners. Yeah,
we'll give them their props maybe a little later, but just to focus on Leinster still to start off, Luke, I know after last year you were kind of saying that Leinster needed to have a kind of a clinical assassin's mindset when it came to managing a final. There was probably the exact opposite, certainly in the first half, with all the the knock-ons, lack of execution and attack, and then there was obviously a lot of other issues that Cian highlighted there. What's your perspective on how things went away from Leinster in that game?
My temptation is to go for a 15-minute answer here, and there's so much to unpack in this, but I think I'm going to stick with some of the key bits that kind of stand out for me in the game. I think they're making a big mistake. I've said this for a long time, against teams that you're well matched up against. not kicking your points, I think it's a mistake. I think they've got something wrong. I think whether they're looking at some data, I'd love for them to come out and say, we've backed up these decisions with some pretty hard data. Now, I think that probably won't. I think you can nearly throw that out the door in the big games. Toulouse took their points like they just didn't even think about it. They were, anything kickable, was being kicked at the start of the game, and that cushion. I think it kind of fed into kind of some of that mindset, that panicky mindset. Leinster feeling like they had to go down and maybe overplay at times, play a bit more quickly than they had to. And kind of fed into the panic a little bit. I think Leinster, that was a mistake. I think they need to have a think about what they're doing there, particularly in the big games. I just think you have to maybe change your mindset. It works against an Ospreys, a Drag, or whoever it is. You can overpower those teams with what you've got there. But against the bigger packs, I just think... it doesn't make as much sense to me. I think you need to start kicking some goals. So that's one part of it. I think that would probably help them. I think some of their individual defence is not good enough. I don't think. I thought some of the positions they found themselves in. Some of it was played off as some brilliant, like the Gibson Park one at the start of the game where Dupont nearly goes through, was hailed as brilliant defence. He did great to realise too late. Well, I thought he realised way too late that there could be an issue there if someone got a grubber kick through. Back three player in my position, I would have been absolutely crucified if I saw if I saw Toulouse's attack in that situation getting to the outside channel of the winger. I know that as the opposition winger on the other side of the pitch, I need to hightail it over there right away, because if the fullback has to come up and they chip him behind, you're in big trouble. Realise that way too late. Got away with it there. And the same thing going to happen. They got very badly exposed. Jordan Larmour recovers really well, but I feel like he hasn't looked up. I feel like he's not looking up at what happens, because when the ball goes that far behind the line to, I don't know who kicks it. I think it's Antoine gives the crossfield kick. He's so far away from your defensive line. You've got to have scanned and gone, okay, what's the danger zone here? And if you knew that the guy was on the outside there, you would never be in that position. We never have to recover as hard. And he makes an unbelievable tackle to recover. But I think a lot of the talk after the game was Leinster, missing opportunities. And they did miss a few opportunities. But Toulouse missed a few good ones as well. So I don't think the defence is exactly where they'd like it to be either. I think there's improvements to be made there, whether that's personnel. I mean, the try they conceded, Larmour does a full 360. When do you ever turn your back on an opposition player? Never. So that's a big, big error. I think as well, I thought the way they dealt with the breakdown, I think the referee had a big part in that. I thought his interpretation was poor. I felt that in the finals. I think some of the referees have copped out the last couple of years on that, and they've let it be really, really messy for both teams. Like Dupont as well didn't get much opportunity to get clear ball away. I think that rule, tapping down the arm, is it's a shocker of a rule. I think it's really not, I don't see how it adds any value to the game. The way they were tapping down Gibson Park and Dupont as well throughout the game. That's a really bad rule. But they also let guys just lie in there in that space. They were technically cleared from the tackle zone, but they were right in that position where they're slowing down the line, getting to the ball. I thought if the referee took control of that earlier, we would have had a better game, because there was attacking players on that pitch. I just didn't think we got to see enough of them, Now in the final, people are nervy and you get mistakes and that, but that was another area where I thought Leinster did not deal with that well, and they haven't dealt with that well against the bigger teams that really compete hard with them at the breakdown. I don't know how you fix that. My initial thoughts on that is that they're not committing enough people into that. They need to commit maybe one more person, particularly in the tight exchanges. Just at the start of the game, sit down a marker, get some clean ball going forward.
That's what Toulouse did, didn't they? They flooded it.
I thought they flooded it. Yeah. Now you run out of options there, so I've been calling for them to have more options. So I don't know I don't know what the solution is, because you do need to have more options to get defences sitting. Because then they go, well, there's more people out here, so I have to sit. I can't come as hard because there's a guy in front of me. But they have to figure out something against the bigger teams, because they haven't been dealing with that well. And the referee's not looking after it. So that's another area. I think their mindset, guys, I think we have to talk about that. When it came to the crunch, Keenan, I love Keenan. What a player. I can't agree with the sevens move, but that's another conversation.
We'll touch on that later.
Madness. But sorry, Keenan, I absolutely love him as a player. He really changes the dynamic for Leinster. What is it? That is a huge mistake to make in extra time.
Carrying it,
you have to know where you are. He's got. If you think about how long that kick was in the air, you have to know where you're positioned on the pitch. That's a big error for one of the best players in the world. I think the best full back in the world, Doris. We thought everyone gives. I heard lots of people saying, "Oh, he's way better player than Jamie Heaslip." He's not. Heaslip would never do that.
They were back to back as well.
They were back to back, and Leinster had them on the rack. Then they looked tired at that point when they got the man sent off at the end of the kind of first half of extra time, and Leinster then go down and get the score. You're thinking, okay, it is game on here. We have them on the rack here. That is a killer moment from and I actually thought Doris had one of his best games that I've seen. He was pretty much unstoppable with ball in hand. It was a two-man job all day for Toulouse, even though they're huge men. He had an unbelievable game. But that's inexcusable. Like, Jamie Hughes would never make that mistake. You have to be better than that on the big stage. So their mindset, look, I'm here. I'm hurting now as well as a Leinster supporter today, and I'm trying to be cold and calculated. And I think if I think about the game, there are a lot of issues that are brought up, but they're only some of them. There's way bigger ones. There's other issues. We could go on and on as if for 15 minutes, but I was so disappointed with them. I really think they're a way better team than they showed. And I think as well, I don't want to completely hog the mic, but there was some of the selection stuff, like how Frawley doesn't play at least 50 minutes at 10 against Ulster. Now, he actually did okay when he came on the pitch, but I just feel like that was madness. Like, Harry Byrne had to be on the bench for me if you played him last week. Asking Frawley to come in there at 10 at the end of the game, I thought he was brave. He took on the drop goals. Have to admire him for that. But he just looked, he should have had more time in there throughout the season. So I'm frustrated. I think you can tell the frustration here. And I will say, to round off the point, because I want to make sure we say it, Toulouse were unbelievable. And can we just say now? I went pretty hard. At this James Gimson Park being the best player in the world a couple of weeks ago. I blew you right in that one. Like, I think that was pretty stark for everyone to see, even though Dupont's passing wasn't great.
In fairness, though, James Lowe was the one who said that afterwards. I know
a few of them said. I think Keenan said it too.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone who's not a Leinster player really thought that.
Well, Grant, sorry, I thought this was mentioned on the pod, and I was saying, are we dreaming here? Like, we better wake up from that.
James Gibson Park is one of the probably the second best, but the gap from him to
might be the second best scrum half.
Sorry, no, that's what I mean.
But they were talking about him being the best player in the world. I was like, Dupont is quite he's head and shoulders above anyone else, and he might be one of the best of all time. I think Jim Hamilton got a bit of stick for saying he's the best of all time. I'm not sure he's wrong. Like, he was there's not one thing in the game that guy can't do.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
I can't wait to talk more about him.
There's lots to unpack from what Luke touched on there, so I want to just quickly touch on one element of it that's been talked about a lot, and is that Leinster maybe not taking their points a lot. Like, I don't agree as strongly with Luke, because I don't think they turned down any gimmies. Like, there was 4 they kind of went to the corner with, but they were all on the touchline, like difficult
one
kicks.
was on the 15 wheel.
Maybe one was a bit in it. Yeah. But that's some of that's game flow as well. Like, even Bernard Jackman, who's everyone's pointing to, who made the point, during the match commentary at 9-9, they got a turnover penalty on the left wing, and Jackman himself on the commentary is like, this needs to go into the corner, and then retrospectively he's saying, they all should have been kicked. None of these are gimmies. I think sometimes people make the point as if they were all gimme 3-pointers, and obviously when the game finishes level, it's easy to be like, if they'd kicked one of them they would have won. But if they kick a 3-pointer there, who's to say what Toulouse do when they're 3 points down? They don't necessarily kick the next 3-pointer.
But if it goes there, you still get the ball back, Will. And if they're 70, say at worst, for some of those kickers, are they 70% chances probably of kicking them? Did they kick 7 out of 10 of them, is what I'm saying? They probably do.
They probably do, yeah. And I'm not saying that he would have necessarily missed them, but I just thought you could justify those calls in the moment. I'm not one of those people who thinks cup finals need to be played drastically differently from other games. There was a cup final 2 years ago when they only kicked their penalties, and everyone absolutely crucified them, said they were way too conservative. That's not what Leinster do. Leinster go for the jugular. And now this time it's like Leinster still kicked 5 penalties. So the idea that they were way too gung ho, I don't really agree. Don't think it stacks up. Like, at the end of the day, they got a scrum penalty with 4 minutes to go, and they went for the posts. If they go to the corner there and the score try the game is over, they win the game. That was one I actually thought they could have been aggressive on and just maybe backed themselves to win the game, because you're taking 20 minutes of extra rugby. We saw what ended up happening. There was red cards, there was yellow cards, there was tries at both ends, there was bad mistakes from 2 of your best players. That could have been over. I'm not saying they were wrong to kick that penalty, because it was a tough game, big decisions, but you're taking it out of extra time's hands. You're saying, do we have it in us to score 1 try here and finish the game?
But Toulouse kicked theirs straight away.
But a lot of them were central. They were long range. Like, one of them in the second in extra time, maybe that Ramos kicked to be fair.
But you get him back on the halfway lines. You probably get the drop goal back. So if it goes dead, or if it goes into the dead ball, you're probably getting the drop kick back on the halfway line. Probably getting tackled on the 10 if it's high. If it's not high, you're probably getting 5 metres past the 10 into their half. So you're kind of back in a good position anyway. So I don't get.
But you could say that if they get turned over on the 5 and Toulouse clear it, you're getting it back in the 22 most of the time.
They weren't really. They were getting back in the halfway, probably on a line out. And if you're getting a line out in the halfway, you're getting it back in your 10. When you like, do you know what I mean? Like,
to round off my point,
yeah.
I think where it became a major issue for me was that Ross Byrne's line kicking was really, really poor.
Very conservative, yeah.
There was one in particular at that moment, actually, that key maul at the start of the second half when it was 9-9. When he was like fist bumping to the crowd and really up for it, and then he goes to kick the touch, and I don't know if it was over adrenaline or what, but that should have been stuck in the 5 metre line. It was like on the 22. He made about 5 metres or 6 or 7 metres, and then you're having a line out in the 15 metre line instead of the 5 or 6 metre line, and that wasn't the only time in the game he did that. So I know people have been criticising him for various elements of his performance, but for me, his line kicking was actually quite damaging because they had a lot of kicks.
He had a bad game. Did you think he had a bad game?
Well, his line kicking, I thought.
Yeah, he was conservative. It's tricky to do that. It's very nervy. It's a nervy thing to do. I've had to do it myself on occasions.
If you're going to turn down those kicks, you have to be putting that a lot closer to the try.
It was clearly their strategy. Like, that's blatantly obvious. And Toulouse's strategy was to take the points at any stage they got. And you have to say Blair Kinghorn kicked really well. I thought that was going to be a big
that was
weakness.
His strategy, and they didn't have Ramos. I was
absolutely.
Like,
so that was very impressive. And you're right. I'm glad you pointed out the Marseille final 2 years ago, because I'll put my hands up. I was one of the people who was saying that why weren't they going for the corner? I felt like they were giving La Rochelle a psychological edge, because La Rochelle were happy to concede penalties, and Leinster, it was like, well, we're not going to take you on up front. So it feels a bit rich now to be sticking the knife in. And even at the time when I was there at the game, I thought the one after half time, having gotten back to level at the break, I thought they should have taken the 3 after half time. I thought that would have been a big momentum shift as well. But I wonder, I've just come from the Leinster press conference, and Jack Nienarber was asked about this, the strategy, and he said, I've seen lots of people say, I think he used to figure 9 penalties, that Leinster turned down 9 penalties. He said he says it's 4.
Yeah, it's 4.
And that's what he said, that he backs the decision. But Ross Byrne is a very good kicker, and he kicked well at the weekend. He didn't kick well in the semi-final. I don't know, did that have any impact at all in terms of them maybe not taking on a couple of those trickier kicks? I doubt it, because we saw what they did against Ulster last week in terms of going for the corner. It's clearly their strategy, but I feel like your big decision makers, your Caelan Doris, who's captain, your Ross Byrne, who's a massive decision maker, need to have a better feel for the game at the time and understand the momentum of it, because I thought they should have went for goal for a couple of them, especially when Toulouse were repelling everything that they had done. So it's clearly a bit of a fine balance, and it's easy to say now they should have taken their points, but I didn't feel like they maybe had a good enough feel for how the game was going.
Whatever about how the game was going, how they were playing, like they weren't catching. Like, I think if I was playing that game, I'd have been thinking, ooh, this doesn't, like, we're not clicking. Like, that's what it felt like on the TV. I've played in those games where you're kind of going, shite, how are we 6 points down? We haven't really had, they haven't had like any gilt-edged opportunities. Maybe they had the ones right at the start, but they haven't really been cutting us up here or anything like that. We're 6 behind. There's guys overrunning the ball. Referees not really helping us out at the breakdown. I think that's a really important point, Will, when you are making the decision, and I think that happens in finals. This is kind of what I'm saying, is like against a team that's really well matched with you, that you're not going to be able to overall with your players that they normally can do in the league. Guys that are going to make big plays against you after making mistakes like that. There was no quitting that Toulouse team on the weekend. After, like, you think about obviously my moment. I don't want to give away my moment, but like, that was a magic bit of play by Dupont. Like that, they had them all throughout the game. And Leinster, you felt like there was guys throwing passes to people who were looking away at the time. There was people making good breaks and decent offload that normally Gibson Park would take, say, from the low break. He'd normally take that.
That's one when I really felt that they weren't clicking.
That's my point. I think
the semi-final, no, but
I think that's your point too. Like, you're going to feel, you go, okay, look, let's just settle the nerves. Let's just, like, while things are not going well, sometimes you have to wait for a period in the game where it is going to go well. You have to be a little bit patient, and sometimes a great way to do that is to go, okay, well, look, we're only 3 points behind here, rather than being 6 or not. You know what I mean? Getting a number on the scoreboard, it does mean something in a big game. It does. It calms you down a little bit.
But see, I suppose my point is they did kick penalties. It's honestly like they were never drastically behind in the game. They did kick their penalties at a lot of times. A couple of times they went to the corner, and what I felt, even though they weren't clicking, I agree with that, and I'd say that they probably felt it as well. I was just thinking, the try will come. Like this team is, they will get a try. They'll go to the. I just kept every time they went to the corner, I was expecting a try, and I say that they were feeling the same. They're confident. They have a very strong squad. They didn't think they would be repaired, and it wasn't like the maul. People were saying, oh, they shouldn't have gone to the maul quite as much. Like one of the mauls was collapsed going over the line that they got a second bite at. Two of them were kind of Toulouse did well to kind of get the turnover with. So it's not as if they repelled 6 or 7 mauls. 2 mauls they repelled, one that Toulouse gave away another penalty at. And so I ultimately didn't have a huge problem with the strategy. But look, the game finished level.
It's easy for us to sit here now.
Yeah,
exactly.
but it was
we have to dissect it.
Yeah, it's a key talking point. A lot of people are saying it,
And I think what we're all in agreement is that when they decided to go for the corner, their execution time and time again, that is worse than the actual decision itself. It's really like poor, unforced errors from players that you just don't expect at all. To me, that's, I'd say, what was more frustrating. And when they were doing their review yesterday and today, I would say that's what will stick in their craw, as opposed to the decision to actually go for the corner. It's like you said, they've got an unbelievable pack. They were confident, they backed it, but they weren't able to back it up, the decisions that they made. And that's where they'll have the regrets, because they were just such poor errors.
Yeah, no, it really was. Like, there's so much else to get into. Like you mentioned Ross Burnett, you thought he had a good game. He's obviously become a focal point going into it. Yeah. He's a focal point now. You think he played well?
I actually did think he played well. I didn't think there was much else he could do. I thought defensively he was solid in there, I think, which is always the area where you're kind of a little bit worried maybe at times. I thought he was up for the game. I thought he made some good decisions. I thought there was guys out there that looked really flustered, like people, because he actually threw a few nice passes as they were going to deck. And I actually thought he was one of the guys who didn't make that many errors. I thought he had some lovely crossfield kicks. But I just felt there was a lot of people around him that looked like they were, as I said, flustered is the best word that I can describe it with, like people overrunning, kind of set plays. People missing their targets at ruck, like particularly off some of the set plays. We talked about them not having any moves. They never got a chance to kind of really execute any of the moves because they all became a complete shit fight because guys weren't cleaning out properly. The execution wasn't there. There wasn't the body height wasn't right, or they were half a second late at ruck time. Like Willis got to dominate the game. I thought he completely dominated the game.
I thought he was man of the match personally.
No, I think you're probably right. So look, I think there was a lot of things, and like it feels like we're really rinsing them. They've lost this in extra time, but at the same time, I think they deserve for us to be harsh on them because they're a great team and they should be doing better. They'll be harsh on themselves. So, look, I thought Byrne was fine. I didn't have a problem with how he played. I had a problem that the guy that was coming in after him didn't have any 10, hadn't played a game at 10 in weeks, I don't think, or hadn't started a game against a decent. That would have been a perfect opportunity away from home. Ulster really needed to win that game. To just play under a little bit of pressure, that would have really stood to him, I thought, in the final.
He was the man that was ultimately entrusted with winning the Champions Cup.
And how he stayed in the pitch, do you think? That was not a good look, I didn't think. Yeah.
Like, it's hard to know what. We don't want to get into it too much because we don't know what was being said. But look,
we have to trust the medics on it. But at the same, because in fairness, like I don't even think you're allowed. Like it seems like most of those decisions have been taken at hand, but that didn't look good. I don't think. But look, leaving that aside, and he played well after. In fairness, so maybe he was fine.
And you're right. It was. Look, he's a professional player. He's played well, but it was an unfair scenario to put him into to expect
like how
him.
He got that kick was brilliant, wasn't it?
And imagine if Ross Bernard went down injured earlier than he actually did. You're expecting a guy to come in from what is the cold and play in one of the most important positions in the team.
And only training reps.
That's what I mean.
It's been a season long, I would say borderline. I don't say
got too many resources.
It's been a season-long bungling of the out-half position, in my opinion. And we've talked about it in this show, like probably every week, in terms of when there's been a Leinster match. Like Ross Byrne gets injured against Munster after the World Cup. Frawley plays that game, plays pretty well. Then they stick him at fullback against Connacht the following week and start Harry Byrne. Then he comes off the bench and kind of wins the La Rochelle game. And then plays a little bit, and then I think he picked up a bit of a knock, and then Ross
he has had a bit of an injury, ravaged. Do you know what I mean? In Leinster's defence, that has been an issue for him, is that he hasn't been able to string together kind of 10 or 15 games. But the problem is that they're over-resourced in that area, So his position where he really should be playing, he's not going to get chances there, So like it's either himself. Like to my mind, it's like for his own career, he's playing on the quite clearly he's not a fullback in my opinion. He can play the position. He's a smart player. He's a good athlete in fairness, but he's not a good enough athlete to play fullback at the top level at international rugby. He is a good enough athlete to play 10 at international rugby. And he's making a big mistake with his career. I'm blue in the face saying that. I'm not going to repeat it again, but I just think that's a big mistake, and I think they're over-resourced in the area. And off the back of that, they're trying to keep everyone happy by giving them game time, but it means that no one else really is getting enough time there, I don't think.
And the thing about it is, like, Ross Byrne obviously picked up the injury. We've no idea how serious it is, but let's say he was out for hypothetical sake, for the run-in. Everything that we've seen this season would suggest that it'll be Harry Byrne will be the one to come in and play 10, not Frawley.
And especially if Hugo Keenan's now gone, who's going to be playing 15? It could well be Kieran Frawley
or Jimmy O'Brien.
No, I think Jimmy O'Brien will be.
You know, but this is the problem.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
No, sorry, it was for the Ulster. It was pre-Ulster, but I would imagine that that's for him.
But
yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Kieran Frawley was asked to win a Champions Cup for Leinster in the closing stages in extra time from 10. But like I said, if Ross Byrne is injured, and he might not be, it's Harry Byrne looks like who's going to be the one to come through. So his head must be absolutely melted in terms of, you know, what he's being asked to do. Because look, anytime you talk to an out half, they tell you, you know, it's all about reps. You need the game time to be able to play the position. And I thought he did quite well, I have to say, when he came on. He asked questions of the Toulouse defence which hadn't been asked while Ross Byrne was on the pitch. He took the ball to the line. He injected a bit of pace. But it was an unfair scenario to expect him to win it. And I know we were chatting about the drop goal, and you both felt like they should have went another couple of phases, but I admired his bravery, and I thought he actually struck it unbelievably well. And if that goes over, look, we're having a very different conversation here, and we're saying how well Leinster did to, you know, the defence came out on top, and, you know, putting Frawley on the bench paid off. But these fine margins are what it comes down to.
I'd love to see. I've actually seen how near it was, because there's no good camera angle from directly behind the goal.
Live, it looked very close to me.
Because where I was sitting, I couldn't have had a worse view of where the ball was.
I think he was expecting it to move back.
Yeah. It was like a golfer's side. His reaction.
Yeah,
he was like, you know,
he was,
we were behind it on a lower level, so I had a good view of it. And I know it, since watching it back, you don't get a good view. Yeah. But when he struck it, I thought it was over, because it was a sweet strike. I was looking at the crowd behind the goal, expecting he's actually won it here. So I wouldn't be, and I'm not saying any of us are here, but I wouldn't be critical of him about that. I thought he showed, because we were criticising Leinster last year for not taking a drop goal, you know. So here's a guy who I was anyway. So here's a guy who
everyone else was. No,
here's a guy who put himself into the position, you know, stepped up like any good out half would, but. Yeah,
well, I take your point though. I thought he did inject something, and like the use of the bench was going to be a question. And like Ross Byrne played 70 minutes and only came off because he got an injury. And I'm thinking, when I'm watching the game there at the time, I'm like, this isn't Johnny Sexton in the World Cup quarter final. Like, does Ross Byrne have to play 80 minutes all of a sudden? Like, Frawley is, as we saw when he came on, injected something, gave something different. I would have liked to have seen Frawley at 60 minutes come on for Ross Byrne. I thought he was playing okay. I didn't think he was.
But you can't do that because you haven't played him. Do you think?
Well,
I don't think he can do that.
But he played well when he came on. So like,
he was great.
The coaches should surely know that that's within his locker if that's what he does.
Do you know?
But I take your point.
If we're talking about him here today, so we're all surprised how well he did. We know he's a good player, but we're surprised how he was able to inject it, given that he's played inject a bit of pace into the game there. Given that he hasn't really played in the position in a big game in quite a long period of time, so. The coaches must be thinking the same thing. Do you know what I mean? They're like, well, we're not going to. If we don't have to change him there, he hasn't played a big game there. We're not going to put him in the Champions League final, the Champions Cup final. You know, do you know what I mean? So, like, in my mind, that tells you everything about the selection. You know, that Ross Byrne did have to play 80 because unless he got injured, and that was like a last straw kind of thing. You know,
the thing about Ross Byrne is he is a very easy lightning rod, I feel like, for a lot of people. And you know, my sense at the time, like at the game, was that I'm not sure how well he played. I'm not saying he played bad, and it certainly wasn't on him that Leinster lost the game. But having watched it back, he actually did a lot of things well in terms of his kicking. A couple of lovely cross kicks. He like bad error for the restart that he kicked out on the full. He kicked these goals from the tee. But I think to win a Champions Cup, I think you'd want a little bit more from your 10, and I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. And like we were talking about him in the immediate after the game, myself and Rod, and yeah, like I said, I think you just want a little bit more from your 10, and like, I don't know if Ross Byrne has any more than what we've seen over the last couple of years. And the irony of that statement that I've just made is I thought he was exceptional in the La Rochelle quarter-final, and I thought it was probably the best that we've ever seen, certainly that I have. And I was thinking, this is the standard now that Ross Byrne has to play at. He wasn't poor by any means against Northampton, but didn't think he was great either, and similar enough kind of, you know, a middling sort of performance. But if you want to win a Champions Cup, I think you've got to have a 10 who does a little bit more. And that's not a personal like criticism or anything. Ross Byrne is a very good player, but I think it's a decision and something Leinster are going to have to look at, not just for next season, but going into the URC playoffs as well.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what they do, because you know, it obviously feels like the end of, you know, it's the European Cup final, the end of the year, but it's a huge, you know, 4 or 5 weeks of rugby still be played. We were just discussing off air, like Leinster could be going to the Loftus Versfeld potentially because of how they've kind of managed the last couple of weeks. It'd be ironic if they have to go back to South Africa because they didn't bring anyone to South Africa in the first place. As we were saying,
the players will be wondering what's going on. I don't usually go to South Africa.
I booked a holiday. So that'll be fascinating to see. A few other things I want to get to. I'm just trying to, I've written a good few notes here, but
how many pages of notes do you have to get this stage?
I don't know if you can see
error,
this on the camera.
What about the, sorry, you talked about the bench and not bringing Ross Byrne off, but what about Porter playing 88 minutes? Like, surely, I met another Leinster player, now wouldn't be unbelievably as well known, like not one of the he played, you know, a really respectable pro guy whose opinion I'd really value, second row, good guy, and he was talking about, is it like, no, he would have played on a lot of benches is the reason I mentioned it, right? And he said to me, he was like, I thought Porter was unbelievable on the weekend, right? And he was unbelievable. But are you telling me that, you know, the guy on the bench, the guy coming off the bench isn't going to be better than a 75, like a Porter that's played 75 minutes in a Champions Cup final?
89 minutes he played.
Yeah, but the point is that, like, so he's played 70 minutes, like, Cian Healy's on the bench there. Like, surely, you know. Now, he didn't really probably matter in the grand scheme of things, but like, I thought Healy and Alalato were unbelievable up in Ulster last week in the scrum. And I just felt like that's another thing. We talked about Leinster using the bench a bit more proactively, a bit more progressively this year. I thought they did in some parts, but they didn't in others. And I thought that was, now maybe it was because they were playing really well.
Well, I just written down here. So like, Ryan came on at half time, Van der Fleer at 45 minutes, Conan was an hour, Kelleher 69, Frawley 70, Alalato 70, Healy 89, McGrath doesn't come on at all. So like, obviously 2 guys came on super early, but after those 2 guys, Toulouse made 5 substitutions before the next Leinster man on, who was Conan at 60. And I know Conan, to be fair, when he came in, didn't have as big an impact as he had in previous games, but you know, we've been kind of pushing that forward, that we thought he deserved a bigger part to play. And like, what do you make?
Let's not forget that Ryan came on because Jenkins was injured.
Jenkins injured,
but he probably would have. I'd say he would have come on at 45 anyway.
Possibly, yeah. I thought it was. Look, this isn't playing hindsight at all, but I thought it was a mistake not starting James Ryan.
I was, and Van der Fleer as well.
I was shocked. I could more understand the logic in terms of what they went for, and Will Connors and Josh Van der Fleer was excellent off the bench as well, but I didn't understand why they didn't start James Ryan. He got the minutes under the belt the previous week against Ulster. He's your co-captain. They were already missing Gary Ringrose as your co-captain. Now, I think Caelan Doris has done a good job since he's taken over as captain, but Leinster picked James Ryan ahead of him to be their captain. He's one of your main line-out leaders. Meant that Ryan Baird had to call it. The line-out was pretty good by and large, but they lost a couple of ones as well.
Mostly bad throws, I think.
Bad throws,
very poor throw.
Down in the corner. But I didn't think that was a good selection at all. I didn't think Jason Jenkins, look, I know he got injured and might have played his last game for Leinster, but I'm not sure he had a big impact on the game. I know they were really keen to play basically the same team that worked against La Rochelle, and look, he did some good things, gave away a lot of 3 or 4 penalties in that La Rochelle game, so I thought that was a mistake as well. I can understand why they did it, but I think if your co-captain is fit enough to be on the bench, he should have been fit enough to start. Especially, you imagine, I know the two of us are always banging on about how important James Ryan is, and a lot of people maybe actually underappreciate him. Think about how poor Leinster's breakdown is. That's James Ryan.
Unbelievable.
That's James Ryan's bread
and
and
butter.
butter.
Turnover after like 2 minutes on the pitch in the second half.
But not even turnover.
He clears lads. He clears lads
so
out of the way,
there,
and that for Leinster, that is so important for the ruck speed. And I thought they badly missed.
I thought they missed Gary Ringrose. I was really dying to bring up that point, because I think I thought Osborne, he was solid, a few good moments.
Few mistakes as well.
Yeah, but look, I think everyone had a few mistakes, even on both sides. In fairness, had a few mistakes in the backs, because the ball was pretty shabby coming out to them all day, and they were under pressure in a final. But I think Ringrose is another interesting talking point. Look, I get why you wouldn't play him, but the other 2 guys are just not natural 13s. They're not natural. They can do a job
clunky,
there.
Isn't it?
It just looked a bit that way. Like as much as Ringrose, I've had some issues with Ringrose, maybe not passing sometimes. I think sometimes he looks for his own options first. But he's bloody good at that. And he is a 13. He's a natural 13. I think he leads the defence. I think he's really nice to defend outside himself and Henshaw in there. Part of me just thinks that might have been an error as well. Now, I know why they didn't. I'm not as hard on them on that one, but I just wonder, would it have been worth taking a chance with a Part of me's thinking that I would have taken the chance at Ringrose.
But you saw the injuries in Toulouse back on how quickly it can happen. For a guy who hadn't played since January, I wouldn't have.
No, but you have to change the bench. So you have to change the bench composition if you.
Yeah.
But what that would have allowed them to do is it would have allowed them to pick Harry Byrne. Now, Frawley as them was good in the end, but I don't know. I just wonder about that one. I wonder about did they really miss Ringrose? Now, let's say it's okay not to select him, and I can understand completely because he has played no rugby, right? But let's just go on the basis that if he is fit, do you think they missed him?
Definitely missed him. Oh, they 100% missed him.
Yeah, I think they missed him big time.
Oh, definitely.
And just to play devil's advocate, and the latest injury update came out from Leinster today, and it's the exact same about Gary Ringrose, that he's stepping up his training load and he'll be assessed as the week goes on. So that doesn't mean he's necessarily fit for this weekend. So to play devil's advocate, we don't know how fit he was, because I agree with you. If he was 85-90%, they might have been tempted to take a chance, but there's been some talk that he either suffered a new shoulder injury or he suffered a recurrence of the shoulder injury. So
look good when I saw him in the gym. He looked great.
The update that came out today wouldn't, again, he might play this weekend, but they haven't said he's definitely available for selection even this weekend. Now, what I would say is I was at the captain's run in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Friday, and Gary Ringrose was running in it, which to me would make me believe that he's very close to returning. But that's just to play devil's advocate in the sense that I don't know how fit he,
they know
how fit he is. Exactly, but all things being equal, it's a no-brainer. It reminded me a bit of when Stuart McCloskey and Bundy Aki played in Rome.
Just two 12s.
Too similar. And that did, I think, have a concertina effect in terms of the attack. It just wasn't as fluid, a little bit clunky. And that's not to take away, because I thought Robbie Henshaw was outstanding, I have to say. And
he had a bad start to the game, I think. He had a few mistakes at the start. But then
one pass at the back that didn't go to hand.
No, but I actually thought Larmour wasn't looking.
I was wondering about that as well.
But he had a few ones. He had a few little errors too, I think. But he was brilliant for the rest of the game. I just thought the whole team had a bit of a kind of clunky start to the game. As I said, there was a few issues that probably resulted in that. Not just that it was a big final day and nerves, etc. Ruck, speed and all that kind of stuff doesn't help, But I think you'd love to see him playing 12. I think he's so influential in 12, you know what I mean? I just feel like that's a loss for the team too, that he's not there, I think having him there next to Ross Byrne is nice. I think for your attack, he's a real focal point. He's so aggressive in there. I think they miss him in 12 too. It's probably that's the point that comes along with the Gary Ringrose point. It does upset. There's a balance there that you strike with two absolute outstanding 12 and 13.
And just in the attack generally, obviously there's been an acceptance that it's taken, I don't know if a step back is the right word, but it hasn't been as efficient and effective as it was in the previous seasons. Obviously Stuart Lancaster departed. The kind of narrative has just been more of a focus on defence. At the same time, Andrew Goodman has been there all year. I know he missed the pre-season, you said, but so did all the star players. They were at the World Cup too. He's going to Ireland in the summer as the attack coach. Should people be a little concerned about what might happen if this is what's happened without Stuart Lancaster basically there also working on the attack? You said I know there was maybe mitigating issues about players overrunning, but the attack hasn't been as good this year. It wasn't good at the weekend. This guy's now been brought in to do the Ireland attack. I feel like he's skating a little in the... a lot of people came up to me after the game and said Leo Cullen should be sacked. There was no talk about Andrew Goodman or... that I heard anyway.
Just to clarify, he's not the attack coach for Ireland. He's coming in as the backs coach, which they have changed the roles.
Okay.
So my understanding is that, and I've had to change sort of how I write and talk about this in terms of the Ireland attack. Andy Farrell does Ireland's attack. So what Mike Catt's been doing is the set piece stuff and skill stuff. That's why Andrew Goodman is being brought in. If you notice the press release, they've changed the titles on it. It's because there is a perception that Andy Farrell is the defensive coach, but since he's become head coach, it's been Andy Farrell's attack, not Mike Catt. So that is an important distinction. Okay. So Andrew Goodman, I think it's worth explaining to the listeners.
Definitely is. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Andrew Goodman isn't being brought in to implement his philosophy on Leinster's attack. He's been brought into his set piece strikes, which have been really good, you'd have to say, for Leinster. But sorry,
presumably he'll have some input into the other thing too.
Of course he will, yeah. But sorry, I didn't mean it to be like, this is how it is. But I think it's important to make that clear, because it's
only... he was doing the Leinster attack.
He is.
Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry, he is doing the Leinster attack. Yeah. But he's not being brought in to do the Ireland attack. It's Andy Farrell's
from
attack.
A Leinster perspective as
well. But you're you said that there's a perception that it's gone backwards, or I'm not sure what the word you use. I think that's a fact. I don't think it's a perception at all. I think Leinster have really missed Stuart Lancaster's influence in terms of the attack, I have to say. And the reason I brought up that Andrew Goodman missed pre-season was because, again, Leinster under Lancaster operated similar to what Ireland did. So Lancaster did defence and attack, but the attacking system was Stuart Lancaster's, and it was Andrew Goodman who was doing the set-piece stuff. So in my mind, it was pretty damaging. Now, I understand why he did it, and he got to go away to the World Cup, and Leinster were happy to facilitate that. I understand it. But the reason I brought it up was because that was the time where he was going to be able to implement his philosophy, because up to then it was Stuart Lancaster's philosophy. So that's where I think they missed a little bit of a trick, and there's been so much focus on the defence and Nienaber coming in late. But I wonder how costly it was that Andrew Goodman wasn't there for the start of pre-season to put his philosophy and his attacking framework to the fore, because I think it has gone backwards.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a few issues there. Like, I think they've probably missed a bit of like some of the personnel probably hasn't.
The obvious one.
The obvious one is the ringrose piece, but like Keenan hasn't been around as much.
I thought you were going to say Johnny
O'Brien.
Sexton, actually.
Sexton is the obvious, but
Sorry,
no, I've just discounted
he barely
that.
played last year.
No, but yeah, he didn't. He rarely plays in the league for them either. So I think the chopping and changing at 10 is the other issue we've discussed in detail tonight, and I think those things don't help either. So there's lots to kind of unpack there, and it's probably not just down at Goody's kind of feat, you know what I mean? I think there's probably a few issues that are that we probably have to consider alongside it, But it's certainly something that they'll have to have a rethink about next year, because they shouldn't be blunt. And Leinster looked a little blunt at times this year. They're not. They're way better than that. They have. I actually felt there was one thing that I did notice this year that I thought has been a little bit different, and it's not actually to do with the backs. I think the forwards have been less. I think they've been less risk. They've become a bit more risk averse, I think, in terms of their passing. I thought Leinster's big point of difference was that, and Ireland's too, by the way, is that the forwards, the interplay among the forwards is so good.
Totally
you think of the Tyburn try against France is a great example of that, where there's an option at the back to it must have been. I don't know who it was anyway, sorry, but there's an option. But Byrne is running the short line, and the forward has that. They were making really good decisions around that. He drops off the short one, like a really nice little bit of deception. Byrne goes through against France. But Leinster have been unbelievably good at that for a long period of time. Whether it's Doris, I think, is unbelievable at it. Van der Fleer has been excellent at it for a long period of time. They worked really, really hard at that. And I feel like they've gone a little bit away from that. Now, it is risky to throw the extra plus pass, but I think it's a risk worth taking, because it keeps the defence very, very honest. And Leinster have some great runners with the ball in the forwards, like guys who can move side to side, big strong guys, big athletes like Baird, etc. So I noticed that they hadn't done that as much. I feel like you heard me talk the last couple of weeks, Will, about Leinster not being as direct at times, and I think like against Northampton, when they really didn't look that blunt, when they weren't playing great, it's when they kind of stuck it up the jumper a bit, and the forward said, you know what, let's just pulverise these guys here, and let's use what we have in terms of the guys in the pack, let's use our skills in here, and let's punch some holes in here. And that's when I thought the backline looked like they got going, is when the Leinster forwards took the game by the scruff of the neck and started interplaying a little bit and being very direct. And I think that's when they're at their best. So it doesn't sound like that kind of all court kind of play, that Leinster that we kind of associate with Leinster. The ball's at the back and the back's kind of punching holes and making these really nice breaks. But there's a lot to why the attack hasn't worked, and I think that's one component that maybe they could think about it. Just I'd love to know. If I was watching the games back, and I'd say, okay, well, let's look at the last 5 or 6 games in the season. Let's compare that to when we were playing our best rugby last year. How much did our forwards interplay in those 2 periods? I think that's worth comparing.
I think it's a very good point, and I completely agree with you. And to my untrained eye, and this feeds into the point I think that you're making, is it's harder to see Leinster's shape, because like when Leinster are at their best and Ireland at their best, you can see their pods and you can see they've got the option of the tip in the outside and on the inside as well. And I don't, at times this season, that hasn't been as obvious to me, and that is when they are at their best, when they are in their shape and they have the forwards linking with the backs. And again, at the weekend and watching it back, there were times when they just didn't seem to get into their system. Now, whether that's down to the pressure of Toulouse, the pressure of the occasion,
a bit of everything,
bit of everything. But it's a very good point. They haven't been, I don't think, as clinical in terms of using their USP, which absolutely, I think, is getting like supporter on the ball. And there was once or twice where they got it.
My point is actually the bit about it's not actually the forwards and the backs connection as much. It's actually the forward to forward. Like if you think back on Leinster's, so Leinster were unbelievable in attack last year. I really think they were snazzy for large periods of the tournament last year. But if you think about, some of the breaks, a lot of the breaks would have come from Doris getting a tip pass from Porter, or, from someone. I think of Tyke Furlong and how good his passing is. But oftentimes the forwards were making the breaks. But what that really does is, to my mind, when I watched Leinster this year, I thought lots of teams could just ignore the outside runner. And I never felt like that was something over the last couple of years when they were really attacking well, you could do against them. I always thought you had to go, oh, well, I can't leave Doris here. I can't leave Van der Fleer, because he could get the pass from the other forward and he could go through that gap, and he's just as nearly as dangerous as some of the backs going through that hole. I just don't remember it as much watching them this year, about forwards kind of putting another forward through a hole. So just something maybe to think about if I was in the Leinster going. I wonder, because I think what that does is it gives the guy out the back so much more time, and it means that you can really pick teams apart because they have to respect the outside runner. You didn't have to respect it as much this year. So I'm harping on too much. I'm going to stop, but I just think that's something they should think about.
Yeah, we're going to give Toulouse their credit now. So I think it ties in with our left wing moment of the week in association with Bank of Ireland, because I think a lot of Antoine Dupont focus is coming up here.
It's hard not to.
My one was his first 50-22, which is a blind piece of skill. But generally, like, he was obviously absolutely unbelievable. Like, it's so funny, like last week when we did our preview and I mentioned, I thought like if he kind of went off script and, you know, created a try or nothing, he went off script a million times, but it wasn't for tries, it was for outrageous turnovers, it was for unbelievable 50-22s, it was just his general mastery of the game. Like, he really can do it all, and it was like, you know, one of these real cliche cheesy things to say, but it was like a privilege to watch someone play that well in a big game like that.
I don't think it's a cliche or cheesy to say that, and I know you were at the game as well, Will, and coming away from it, that was one of my big takeaways, that we've actually just watched one of the great players, but also deliver one of the great performances in an absolutely massive game. Because, like, if Antoine Dupont isn't playing, there's a good chance Leinster might win. And like,
I think did they not definitely win? Surely they definitely.
If Paul Grau is starting at the weekend, I don't think.
He's
being
unbelievable.
Being generous,
Yeah.
but like, to see a player like have so much influence over the game, and you're so right, Will, and not for the big breaks and putting lads through holes. Like, 4 turnovers, he would have had 5 if Richie Arnold hadn't lost his head and had taken out.
He actually
won the
over.
poach there as well.
Yeah.
That would have been 5. I'm going to tie this in with my moment of the week as well, but his ability to kick off his left and his right from the box kicks.
The kicks were huge. Like, I milled Keenan at the start of the look, I was being harsh, but
It was right on the halfway.
It was unbelievable.
Dropping
kick.
right on the line.
Yeah. Right on the line. But huge kick,
just
though.
in the kind of that zone where Keenan felt he had to take it.
Uncertainty,
But like you talked about, so earlier on we were talking about, say, Leinster, you know, when like, so you were saying, even if you turned it over on 5 metres, you know, to the opposition, or they get a turnover, they kind of clear it out and you get on the 22 again. They weren't. They were getting on the halfway line again. And the kicking was unbelievable.
And both of the 50-22s had like no room to spare. They were just.
I thought one of them was lucky. The one you picked is you never wanted to be that close, but it was unbelievable.
Well,
he's definitely trying to do it.
The second one, I actually was watching that one right where I was sitting. The second one was actually outside the 22. I thought, because I had a better view than the touch judge did, because where he was running from.
Will wave his flag.
No.
I was like, no.
Touchy, got that one wrong.
They didn't check that, but you know.
We've got a pitch invader, folks. Yeah, exactly. Well, I do like it's. Sorry, I obviously have my bit as well. But I just love talking about him. Like, what a player! Like, there's not one. Like, he even got the block down on low behind him. That creates the nerves. And Leinster don't go back to that option for the rest of the game. There's all these
and
things.
Something I didn't realise until I watched it back, and I was writing about it for a piece on Monday. The one guy who's off the line blocking Frawley's second drop goal attempt at the last minute of interest is Antoine Dupont. It was quite funny actually when he thought he was coming off, and you could just see the look of it. Like, hardly, I'm hardly coming off.
Well, I mean, the first time Ugo Mola did something a bit.
But take every other player on the pitch off bar me.
His ability though to scan for those kicks is unbelievable, and like, it's obviously impossible to see it when you're watching it live. But when you watch it back on TV, all he needs is like a second to look up, scan the picture. That's what separates the great players. But I'm going to tie it in now with my moment. For me, look, the moments of skill, like the 50-22s, the turnovers, the jackal turnovers, were unbelievable. But I wasn't the only one. There was like, if everyone around me in the press box just actually started laughing when he got the maul turnover. Like, it was outrageous. Like, you were
what can't he do? Like,
because you were watching it going, oh wow, that was probably Jack Willis or Flamand or someone, and then the replay came up, and we were all just going, this is silly. The Toulouse players call him the Martian because of like things he's doing, but he's redefining like scrum half play, and I just thought that was an unbelievable moment. He caught Sheehan first, and he just cleverly wraps him around, gets him to the ground, and that was a big moment.
That's my moment. Don't.
No, not. That was my moment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Which was your moment?
Sorry, on the maul turnover. Where he tackled.
We're having another incident.
No.
That was the first time.
Where he tackled Sheehan, and then he gets him out and he multiplied. Like, that was just outrageous from a back, because if your back row or your tight head lock does that, you're going, wow, that's a big moment. So I went for that because I was just like what can this guy not do?
I would go further and say he's redefining rugby. Like
Yeah.
what you can do. There's literally not one part of the game that he didn't impact. Like he was the guy. Now I know I said I hate the rule, but he was the guy kind of slapping down Gibson Park. He was spoiling at ruck time. He was chasing, blocking down kicks. He was doing everything. Like there's not one part of the game. He was the guy attacking. Like even he was the guy who got Lowe sin bin with the kind of like because Lowe actually like he's in a bad position, right? But you can end up there in that defence quite a bit. But it's the way Dupont does it. It's like he throws kind of almost like a basketball pass, which you might like. It's a pure reaction from Lowe. Now it's bad by him, but it's still unbelievable by Dupont. Do you know what I mean? Like because it nearly if he doesn't put his hand up, I think they might be through. So. God, I love talking about him. He's like, what a player we're watching.
Your moment was the best moment, but you just beat me to it, so I couldn't.
I got the email in straight away. Yeah, no,
you need to be very fast to get out of the loop.
Fastest finger first.
But I think my moment was when he makes a stinker of an error, like unbelievable by Sheehan. Like what a player Sheehan is as well. Like, Sheehan, like what an athlete he is. Now I think he probably should stop and look for a little bit of support when he knows Kinghorn is got him, or at least try and let Kinghorn go by him because I think they might score a try then, or they might even be in a better position with Kinghorn out of the game. But how good is Sheehan like to rob that ball, step, and then he's like, in fairness, now no one else is catching the bar Kinghorn, and Kinghorn's rapid in fairness. But Dupont, who makes the error, turns around having made it. I think he has time to complain to the referee quickly that it's a knock on from Sheehan. But still, while he does that, is able to get back. Kinghorn saves the day with a brilliant tackle, and he beats Osborne to the space. So he's got to go around. It's a perfect entry by him. I do think he does rest on his hands a little bit, but I don't care. Like, I'm going to allow it. Like, what a player. Gets back, gets the turnover. It felt like one of the big moments. It felt like the Doris turnover to me, or the Doris bit of crazy kind of penalty that he gives away. It was that big a moment where you're kind of going, whoa. That is just magic.
Like if Leinster score a try off a Danchi and intercept from 60 metres, the lift that gives them.
From nothing.
Yeah,
from
absolutely nothing. Like, that's a
yeah.
huge momentum shifter. Like it's funny, another cliche is, the seven skills, but that's a pure sevens thing. Like,
that actually is a sevens.
Hunting someone down, being part of the ruck.
But he's doing it before sevens.
Getting the turn. I know he was, but like he said it himself, his jackling
has improved.
I don't think I've seen him got 4 turnover penalties in the game before. Until today.
He's so strong. I don't get how strong he is. Yeah. He's in there wrestling with lads who are like, so he must be 85 kilos, wringing wet. Like he's not a big. He must be 5'5" or 5'6", and that is what I love about our game. Is that that guy, as diminutive as he is this. He's able to impact the game more than all the big guys around him. He was the most physical guy on the pitch, bar Willis probably. I think he was unbelievable all game. He couldn't be. It takes 2 guys to wrap him up in a tackle. He's slipping through tackles with pace, with footwork, but he can also hand you off. Like if you don't get a good grip of the guy.
Remember Mac Hansen in the Six Nations?
It holds him up. Like now, Mac Hansen isn't that big in fairness, but the strength, like that would if a back rower did that, you'd be if Etzebeth did that, you'd be like, whoa, like Etzebeth's like.
It's the mindset thing to get back and want to make up for your error, and then like
I'm pretty sure he complained to the ref as well,
and not actually make a mad decision by flying off your feet, but like he just
it's a yellow card if he gets that wrong, because Leinster, coming in.
But he just has this like unbelievably driven mindset. He did the captain's run press conference on Friday, the day before the game, and like he just sat at the top table and he was asked like one question in English, and like he doesn't really ever break like emotion. He's like a robot, but he is just a freak.
He looks intense, doesn't he?
It is a privilege, Will, to have watched that this weekend, and we're very lucky. He's still only 27. Like we have so many great years to look ahead of.
It's funny. Like first time I remember seeing him play, I think it was 2016-17 season, last pool game, Leinster Cast. It's a draw and Cast. It was a big game for Leinster. They needed to win to get like a home semi-final. They didn't win, they drew. And Dupont was playing 9 for Cast, and he was unbelievable. I was like, who is this guy? But back then he was just making the breaks. And all the things we talked about today, he's added. Like he's added these unbelievable skills. He's added like the jackling of a back row, getting in like a maul spoiler like second row. His kicking is absolutely sensational. And I'd love to know how he's honed his skills to such a degree, because obviously a lot of French players have the flair element that he brings, but as you say, he's so strong. His low centre of gravity, he can't be shifted off a ball.
But even I've watched him this year. Did you see that try where I think he nearly does everything in the game. Like he literally, I think he might get the turnover. This play for Toulouse, and I think it was just before the Six Nations started, because we were moaning about him not playing for France. I was moaning about him not playing for France and going and playing the sevens. But like there was a phase of play, like it was the Friday night before the Saturday game, I think he played, and I think he gets the turnover. I think he takes a quick tap and puts someone through a hole, and they literally chase it 70 metres down the pitch. He then is maybe the third guy there, but someone passes the ball back to him from having made the break. He has a crossfield kick then, like it puts a guy in. I'd say there's not one thing.
I think he was playing out half as well.
I think he might even play out half.
Yeah.
Like
there's 2 or 3 of them on the pitch.
It's unbelievable. So he's so fit. Like, and that seems to be like, you think of some of the best players. I always put Bowden Barrett in that category. Like the fitness levels of the best guys. It's still, for any kids out there, it's still a defining factor. I never really had it myself, that level. But if you have it and you can work on it and hone it, all the best guys have it. Dupont, as you say, it feels like there's 2 or 3 of them out there. I just loved watching. So look, I was delighted he got the win, you know.
And just to give 2 other guys a shout out, and 2 like non-French players who I thought were immense. I thought Willis, obviously we touched on him. He was brilliant at the
30
breakdown.
tackles,
30
tackles.
He probably got 3 or 4 turnovers as well.
Or at least affected them.
And I thought Blair Kinghorn was brilliant.
The difference, Leinster actually, I didn't think Leinster actually were playing that great, but when Ramos came on, they attacked him in the air and they got loads of change, whereas they got none of that off
Kinghorn was good in the air.
Good,
his penalties were actually quite tricky. Like, he were 2 long rangers, and in the quarter or the semi-final against Harlequins, his kicking was quite poor, so there was a lot of pressure for him to be selected because he knew he was going to be kicking his goals. I thought he was brilliant.
It was a great selection, because you're right.
I thought Ramos I thought it was a mistake.
I did too, but when Ramos came on, you're so right. Leinster went after him, and he's just not good in the air. Kinghorn is, what is he, 6 foot? Maybe?
He's a big boy.
He's a big boy.
And he's quick.
He commands the air when he gets up. So yeah, it was absolutely inspired.
Great to get that tackle on Sheehan, I thought. It was great. You see how quickly he switches on to get him. Like,
inspired selection, absolutely, and inspired signing as well.
Yeah, swapping Edinburgh for Toulouse mid-season, like, you know,
delicious.
It's pretty good move from his part. Just before we finish up, then, like, so we've talked about the match, how it unfolded, but what is it, you know, to lose 3 finals in a row? You know, this team, like, if they go on next year and they win with Snyman and Geordie Barrett, this is going to be a permanent stain, I would say, on these guys' CVs. Like, they're unbelievable players, but like, to lose 3 finals in the manner in which they've lost them, 1 last-minute try, 1 17-point collapse at home, and 1 game where you butcher a myriad of chances throughout the match, like, for a team that good, for a coaching staff with the World Cup winners and all these guys, it's something that no matter what they go on and do in their career, I feel like it'll be a real black mark on their CV.
I think I think you're right. I think it will be, but I think they'll never forget it either, because of the manner of all the games, and you've just outlined it really well there, Will. Like, they've given away the 2 leads against La Rochelle and just not playing as well as they could in that Toulouse game. So yeah, like, I've seen lots of calls, you know, that Leo Cullen isn't the right man. I don't agree with that at all. I have to say, you look at the age profile of this squad, it's still very good. Leinster aren't going away anytime soon. They've got, like you said, RG Snyman and Geordie Barrett arriving next season. They could be, you know, even in better position to win it, but I think there is a danger that this will leave scars. And if you want, you can throw in a World Cup quarter-final defeat as well, which lots of these players were playing in. And there are concerns, I think, over their mental ability to get the job done in the big games. Like, compare that to Toulouse, who haven't lost a final since Munster beat them in 2008 Heineken Cup final. They've won 9 finals in a row between top 14 and the Champions Cup. And obviously that's a long time, and there's been loads of changeover, but it's in their DNA that when they get to finals, they just win. And like, lots of stuff have been made about Leinster had Toulouse's number over the last couple of years in semi-finals. That was in Dublin. It's a different ball game. Well, obviously Leinster would say it wasn't for the final last year and they lost to La Rochelle. But Toulouse went into that game, and Uga Mala was making this point on Friday that, you know, this is a massive leveler being in London, and so it proved. So Toulouse have an ingrained mentality, like I said, of finding a way to get the job done. And I thought bringing in Nienaber this season, away from what he does on the defensive side of things, was going to be the missing ingredient in terms of, you know, just finding a way to get over the line, and they haven't. So question marks hang over this Leinster team. And I think there's huge pressure on them now to win the URC. If this team go 3 seasons without winning a trophy, that is just simply not good enough for the quality of players that they have and for the coaching staff. And that's not being unfair. I know that when Leinster come in at the start of every season, they expect to win the double. So to go 3 seasons without winning a trophy is a disaster. So they've left themselves with work to do in the URC, but if they don't win it, then this is another lost season.
Yeah, like, it's not the end of an era. Like, you look through the team sheet, as you say, like, you know, bar like 2 or 3 guys in their 30s, everyone else, their age profile is still really good. They've signed 2 great players next year. would I back them to win it next year? If you ask me now, I probably would. But we've literally said the same thing every year.
I'm so depressed.
It's become a cliche at this stage. They'll do it next year. That's how you say. Literally, you say, "Oh no, the next year will be the year." But I agree with Keane. Like, there's still a season to be played here. There's still like a full run in. I'll be very interested to see how they finish this season out. It'll tell me a lot about the team and where their head's at. If they go and don't win the URC, and at the moment they're up against it to do so, Munster have the inside track at home advantage. They might have to go to play the Bulls in South Africa. Like it's in an interesting place for this team after, as Keane said, 3 seasons without a trophy with the squad they have.
Massively disappointing. I think. Yeah.
I don't even think they're second.
They'd be good at themselves. I'm really trying. I've been in a situation where you're getting. I know where they are at the moment. It's a really low spot to be. But I just, I think they've kind of disrespected the league a little bit. You've heard me moan about this the last couple of seasons, and they've put themselves in a really difficult position now where there was no need. And I think they should be playing their guys. Now, they might be restricted by what minutes they can have guys out, but I think they need to have a rethink about that, because you still need guys to be winning competitions, particularly if they've got the best team in the competition. You need them to be playing battle-hardened kind of rugby teams, and to get battle-hardened yourself, So, and they need to take some risks around injuries. I think they're really gotten very conservative about who they select for these games, So I hope they do it, but I think they've made the journey very, very difficult. Hard to see them. I hope I'm wrong, but I think now the scrum would give you a lot of, they were so good against Toulouse in the scrum. You'd hope they do a little bit better if they have to go to Loftus, which it looks like. Is Loftus probably
yeah.
Probably it looks like it is Loftus. We don't know. Yeah. There's lots of permutations.
The permutations, man.
Yeah. Will's the permutations man. But I feel like I wouldn't like to be going away to Loftus.
Sorry, they have to win a quarter final first. Well, we've just got to
skip through it.
That is going to be at home, though. We should.
Yeah, they'll have one home quarter final. It's hard to know who that'll be against.
They have to pick themselves up, and there's guys there'll be tired bodies after that. Tired minds.
What team will they even pick this weekend?
I think it's heavily rotated. Is my understanding. So I think you're not going to see a lot of the guys who played, and then they'll be back in for the 3 on the road.
In fairness,
they will hope
they'll be battle hard and they haven't played extra time. So they do rest.
They need a break.
This makes sense to rest them.
And they're already through in the quarterfinals. So.
Yeah, but they've put themselves in a difficult position, lads, to go and win it. And I think that's that has become now to my mind, it's viable that they don't win this thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a done deal.
Having to go to the Bulls, and then if they do win that, having to go maybe to Thomond Park the following week.
Munster are playing great.
Travelling from South Africa to play an informed Red Hot Munster team. Yeah. It's by no means
it's not a guarantee, but I would caveat it from my point of view, saying they are absolutely good enough to bounce back and win the URC, and then all of a sudden the narrative is slightly different. Well, sorry, it is different around the season.
Yeah, two silver linings from our perspective, I suppose, is that it was another unbelievable final. You could argue that the last 3 finals have been the 3 best Champions Cup finals in terms of drama. Obviously at the weekend there was no tries, but you were saying, Keane, you were working at it, writing a report. There wasn't a moment where you can be I'll write 300 words now, I'll just take a breather. It was just jam-packed with talking points and action, and not that it's any consolation to Leinster because they lost again, but it's great that they've been in the final to give us something to talk about. If we were watching Saracens, Toulouse every year, the interest levels wouldn't be there. So at least we've been able to have a good conversation like this deep into the year. So I'd like to thank Keane and Luke for joining me on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. We'll be back next week to review the final round of URC action. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen on the Irish Independent website. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.